Apache, the unconquered spirit of the Southwest. Long before the modern nations of the United States or Mexico were formed, before any Europeans set foot in the New World, the arid deserts, high plains, and rugged mountains of the American Southwest were home to one of the most resilient and formidable indigenous peoples in history, the Apache. They were not a single tribe, but rather a collection of culturally connected bands that included the Chiricahua, Mescalero, Jicarilla, Lipan, and Western Apache. Each had its own distinct traditions and leaders, but they all shared a common linguistic root and a deep spiritual connection to the land they roamed. The Apache were hunter-gatherers, fiercely independent and mobile. Their survival in such a harsh landscape depended on adaptability, endurance, and community resilience, qualities that would define them for centuries. The arrival of Spanish explorers and missionaries in the 1500s marked the beginning of an era of conflict that would stretch across generations. Unlike some tribes that engaged more readily with European settlers, the Apache viewed outsiders with suspicion and often hostility. Spanish colonizers built missions and settlements, aiming to convert the native populations to Christianity and integrate them into the colonial system. For the Apache, this intrusion was intolerable. They resisted fiercely through raids, ambushes, and constant migration. As European settlements grew, the Apache became adept at guerrilla warfare, using the land to their advantage. They would strike quickly, then disappear into the vast wilderness. These tactics frustrated both Spanish and, later, Mexican forces, earning the Apache a fearsome reputation that would endure into the modern era. Following Mexico's independence from Spain in 1821, tensions with the Apache did not subside. The new Mexican government continued efforts to suppress Apache resistance, offering bounties for Apache scalps and sending military expeditions deep into tribal territory. This era was marked by brutal violence on both sides. However, the tide began to turn in the mid-19th century when the United States expanded westward. Following the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, the U.S. acquired vast stretches of land that included traditional Apache homelands. With this acquisition came forts, settlers, railroads, and new waves of displacement. The U.S. government introduced policies to confine indigenous populations to reservations, a strategy seen as a path to assimilation. The Apache, deeply tied to their ancestral lands and ways of life, resisted with every fiber of their being. It was during this turbulent time that one of the most iconic figures in Native American history rose to prominence: Geronimo. Born Goyawe in 1829, Geronimo belonged to the Bedonkohe band of the Chiricahua Apache. His life was shaped by trauma when, in 1851, Mexican soldiers massacred his mother, wife, and children. This personal tragedy became the catalyst for his transformation from a peaceful member of his community into a relentless warrior and tactician. For decades, Geronimo led his followers on daring raids across the U.S. Mexico border, attacking military outposts, settlements, and transportation lines. His knowledge of the terrain, coupled with his ability to inspire loyalty, made him a ghost-like presence in the mountains and deserts of Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. Geronimo's name became synonymous with resistance. He was more than just a warrior. He was a spiritual leader, deeply respected among his people. His leadership was marked by a commitment to protecting his community from the relentless advance of colonial and later American forces. As U.S. military technology improved and the government's Indian policy became more aggressive, the pressure on Geronimo intensified. By the 1880s, the U.S. Army had mobilized over 5,000 troops, along with hundreds of native scouts from rival tribes, in an all-out effort to capture him. Despite being vastly outnumbered and outgunned, Geronimo evaded capture time and again. His campaigns were marked by brutal endurance, covering hundreds of miles on foot, navigating hostile terrain, and surviving on limited resources while constantly being pursued. In 1886, after decades of resistance and repeated surrenders and escapes, Geronimo finally capitulated. On September 4th of that year, he surrendered to General Nelson A. Miles in Skeleton Canyon, Arizona. Only 16 warriors and 30 women and children remained with him. It marked the end of the Apache Wars and the last major indigenous resistance campaign in the continental United States. Geronimo and his followers were not offered amnesty. Instead, they were transported as prisoners of war, first to Florida, then to Alabama, and eventually to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Despite being a captive, Geronimo remained a prominent figure. He participated in world fairs, rode in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade, and was photographed widely. However, he was never granted his freedom and died a prisoner in 1909 at the age of 79. While Geronimo's story is perhaps the most well-known, it is just one chapter in the broader history of the Apache people. Other leaders, such as Cochise and Victorio, also fought valiantly to protect their lands and preserve their culture. Cochise, known for his dignity and diplomatic efforts, managed to secure a short-lived peace before conflict resumed. Victorio led his band in a tragic yet heroic campaign that saw them battle overwhelming military forces before being defeated in Mexico. These leaders, and many others whose names have been lost to time, stood as pillars of resistance in an era when indigenous ways of life were under siege across the continent. Their stories exemplify the resilience and complexity of Apache society, which valued both warrior prowess and communal responsibility. Today, the legacy of the Apache lives on. Many Apache descendants reside on reservations in Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, where they continue to practice traditional customs, pass down their language, and preserve their unique cultural heritage. Tribal governments, schools, and cultural centers play a vital role in sustaining Apache identity in the face of modern challenges. The story of the Apache is no longer confined to history books or folklore. It is a living, breathing narrative of a people who refuse to be erased. Their struggle, survival, and ongoing cultural revival represent a powerful chapter in the broader story of human resilience. To understand the Apache is to confront the realities of colonialism, the brutality of frontier warfare, and the enduring power of spirit and identity. Their history is not just about loss and struggle. It is also about honor, adaptation, and perseverance. In the red canyons of Arizona, the snowy peaks of New Mexico, and the wide plains of Texas and Oklahoma, the spirit of the Apache endures. It whispers in the wind, rides with the storms, and burns in the hearts of those who remember. For the world, the Apache remain a symbol of what it means to fight, not just for survival, but for the right to be oneself, unbroken and free.